is Matt Shea broadcasting live from here in Spokane, Washington. For those of you that are out there, it's election time, and you know, like clockwork, they are going to do the smears and slander and innuendo and implication that they normally do. This year, the counter state is working overtime, both at the national level and at the local level to do this. As you have heard me talk about before, there are two main counter states in America, the Marxists and the Islamists. That's the second one. It's important to understand this because of what I am about to tell you. And bringing this down locally, what I'm about to expose very publicly for the first time. In fact, I've been wanting to do this video for a long time. Yesterday, the Rolling Stone posted an 8,000-word article that was essentially a slander smear piece, a hit piece against me. Now, when they came to Spokane, we actually filmed the interview. And you can watch that and decide for yourself if the interview that was filmed is what they reported in the Rolling Stone. You can see that interview on Readout News right now with Shea, and it's pretty black and white to me that they took almost everything that they could and put a massive leftist spin on things. You need to understand something, that this is part of something called a Maoist insurgency model, and this is called political warfare. They don't care about the truth. All they care is about taking things out of context, twisting whatever else is out there, and then creating this narrative that they have been creating about us that love the Constitution, that love America, that love God and Jesus Christ as somehow being racist hate mongers. Okay, that is the narrative that they're putting out there. And there are some people that would claim to be on the right that are saying some of the same things. So I want to get into something else that happened today. Ian Pickett and Tanner Rowe both published a video that alleges there is a secret document about going out and advocating the killing of people. Nothing could be farther from the truth. And I want to call out these two gentlemen in particular. Ian Pickett is the person who came against Marble Country and Marble Country Fellowship and called them a racist hate cult, essentially. The only problem is that they have two black pastors that live on Marble. You have a person of Jewish descent that lives on Marble, and you have three members of a Native American tribe that live on Marble. And this whole racist white nationalism thing fell flat on its face. Then you have Tanner Rowe. Now, Tanner Rowe is a virulent anti-Christian. And let me put up a screenshot of something that he has. And I'm going to be referring to a few notes here as we go through this. But essentially, you can see this document right here, but it's a screen capture of what he posted online, very specifically that the United States is not a Christian nation. I'm going to debunk this, and I've been speaking about these things very clearly recently, but I'm going to debunk this and show where he has absolutely no credibility anymore. And by the way, if you read some of his rants online and you look at some of his countenance and his demeanor online, you can really tell that he's coming across very violent and angry himself. So let's pull up America's Christian heritage. This is completely undisputed. Historians acknowledge this. This is coming directly from primary source documents, not what somebody thinks about Christianity. First of all, you have the Mayflower Compact, which was very clearly a covenant with God to advance Christianity. That's why they came. But even more importantly, in 1643, on May 19th, John Winthrop, and he wrote the Articles of Confederation of the United Colonies. This was the first document that actually united the colonies at that time. Here's what it says. Whereas we all came into these parts of America with one and the same aim, we all, not some, okay, that's very important, to advance the kingdom of Jesus Christ and to enjoy the liberties of the gospel in purity with peace. Pretty clear there. But it was interesting that later, in 1765 through 1769, Sir William Blackstone wrote his commentaries on the laws of England, and that became the foremost legal document of that time. Understand the timeline, 1769 and then 1776. It's very important. And in that document, it was very clear that William Blackstone laid out the Christian foundations for English law. And that's why the framers, and particularly Thomas Jefferson, put in the Declaration of Independence the law of nature and of nature's God. That was the foundation of the legal system. But a lot of people then say, oh, what the founders really argued it, etc. Later, in the 1850s, the 33rd Congress of the United States of America actually did an investigation into whether America is a Christian nation. And it was very important for I think everybody to understand at that time that we're asking this question, what the findings of this Judiciary Committee would be. Here are the findings. Senator George Badger and also Representative James Meacham, so it was both in the House and the Senate. Here is the first report. Quote, "We are a Christian people," end quote. An official report from Congress determining that. Second quote, "Had the people during the Revolution had a suspicion of any attempt to war against Christianity, that revolution would have been strangled in its cradle. At the time of the adoption of the Constitution and the amendments, the universal sentiment was that Christianity should be encouraged," end quote. People still were asking questions, and in 1892, the United States Supreme Court took up this issue, and in Holy Trinity versus U.S., here is what the United States Supreme Court wrote. Quote, "This is a Christian nation," end quote. So you can see that Tanner Rowe is completely discredited as any kind of expert on history whatsoever, and his anti-Christian virulent rhetoric really has no place. Now, let's get to the document these guys posted online. First of all, it was a summary of a series of sermons on biblical war in the Old Testament as part of a larger discussion on the history of warfare. And it included, which they didn't put online as well, other documents like the Battle of Cowpens, the Battle of Kings Mountain, talked about some observations from the Vietnam War, and most importantly, and this is absolutely critical, talked about how we need to get back to just war theory. This document in and of itself was not a secret. I've actually talked about portions of this document publicly and talked about just war theory. Let me get into just war theory because a lot of Christians don't know why we have just war theory and why we need to get back to it today. If I was in Congress right now, this would be something very critical, but it's also something very critical to discuss among people, among Christians. For, I don't know, probably 2 or 3 years, we've had veterans, former first responders, active first responders discussing these issues, and that's the broader context of this document that they allegedly put out. It wasn't secret. I want to make sure that's underscored. Here we go. Just cause. Now, this is just war theory. And oh, by the way, let me start by prefacing that every defensive war, so self-defense is always just. So we're talking about offensive war. That's very important to understand up front. First of all, just war theory has to have a just cause. You can't just go to war for vengeance. Secondly, you have to have comparative justice. While there might be rights and wrongs on each side of the conflict, there has to be a wrong that so significantly outweighs those things that are being suffered by both sides when you go to war that it's worth it to go to war. This is the Christian model right there, and that's why I think it's important to understand that today in the context of the United States when it goes to war. Thirdly, you have to have legitimate authority. Only duly constituted public authorities may wage war. That's why I have been so outspoken on this issue in my public speeches and also on Patriot Radio that we have to have a congressional declaration of war. We also have to have the right intention. Force must be used truly for a cause that is to correct a suffered wrong. And again, not for vengeance or something like that. And if, as you're listening to this as Christians, you probably understand how far away we are getting from just war theory. Also, you have to have a probability of success. It can't be a suicide mission. It also has to be the last resort. And in the context of how warfare has evolved, taking from the Old Testament all the way to modern laws of war, it's really important to understand that this last resort portion of this is why we have a public debate on these issues. Lastly, proportionality. The anticipated benefits of waging war must be, again, proportionate to the expected evils or harms. And that also implies proportionate force as well. So you don't just go out and you kill all the men in a village. You don't do something like that. It is proportional. To the extent you can render hostile forces completely destroyed, you do that so that their military structure and their populace say, okay, we want to have peace. That was actually the doctrine in World War II, was to have a total surrender. But it was an intention, especially after World War II, to make sure that we were not targeting civilians. And I have seen, being in the Army myself, so much goes into making sure that civilians are not targeted. In fact, to a great extent, lawyers are now assigned for that very specific role in targeting missions throughout the world today. All right, that is just war theory, so that we have defined what we are talking about. And I want to just end with this. Expect more of these attacks to ramp up as the counter state realizes it's beginning to lose this upcoming election. And specifically, for somebody like myself that has had dozens and dozens of hours of counterterrorism training, we know who the enemy is. And let's keep our eye on who the enemy really is. Let's also bless, in the name of Jesus Christ, all of those people who are seeking to persecute us. It is so important to do that. And last but not least, these two individuals, Ian Pickett and Tanner Rowe, have been working with Jay Pounder, who is working on a project called Exceptional Gentlemen. Jay Pounder is a friend of mine, and he also is a fundraiser for Moody Bible Institute. I'm going to ask them personally right now that they condemn the slander and lies coming out of these two individuals, because it's not Christian. And really, for I think all of us out there, we can do a heck of a lot better than that. I look forward to working with all of you to continue to make lower taxes, less government, and more freedom a reality, and also to counter what the leftists are doing in the narrative. Over the next 2 weeks, we're going to be exposing a lot of it, and I'm sure you guys are going to enjoy it and get used to these videos, because I'm going to be doing a lot more of them. God bless all of you, and really, truly, like I say at the end of Patriot Radio, may He make this generation the greatest one.